Hi, I'm Michael Dresser and I teach a tool and a practice called the Wheel of Consent. And you may have heard me talk in other videos about how I describe consent as a life skill. So why do I think this, and what does any of this have to do with sex, which is often how we're used to hearing about consent? So we've all experienced having our limits and our boundaries transgressed, and this could be from unwanted touch to being bombarded by ads or spam every time we open our emails. And we understand that these things are unconsenting experiences. They're things that we haven't agreed to and that we don't want. And yet, we often think about the concept of consent in relation to touch-based interactions, and particularly sexual ones. And I would say that this isn't really helped by the fact that our culture tends to conflate touch with sex, and that they mean pretty much the same thing, or that touch will somehow inevitably be connected to sex sooner or later. So when consent is mentioned, it often feels, or it can often feel like a scary word because of this tendency that we have to connect consent with touch and touch with sex. And sex can be challenging for many of us for lots of reasons. Maybe because of our upbringing, it might be because of the experiences we've had, or it might just even be our lack of education about it that makes it feel challenging for us. So sex itself is maybe not the best environment to try to figure out where our limits and our boundaries are. And yet this is where the conversation about consent often tends to focus. And this is where the Wheel of Consent really comes into its own. So the Wheel of Consent gives you practices and tools to learn what consent feels like in contexts which are more simple and straightforward and don't involve sex, and often ones which don't even need to involve touching anybody else, in fact. Now, the reason this is important is that when you know what the consenting version of an interaction feels like in your own body, it then really becomes much easier to trust your ability to protect either your own limits or to honour somebody else's when you're in a situation which might feel a bit more vulnerable, like sex. So to put it another way, consent is not a sex skill, which is how it's often presented. Consent is a life skill, which is how I prefer to talk about it. And you can learn to have consent in intimate or tender or challenging or vulnerable situations by learning to have it everywhere else first. So if you want to take the first steps to getting these skills in your life, check out my website.